Hi, it's Miss Lisa from the St. Paris Public Library. Welcome back to our chapter book reading just before bed. Tonight is night number 4 of reading the book, The Fantastic Secret of Owen Jester by Barbara O'Connor. And tonight we're going to start in chapter 19. Owen had begged and pleaded to stay home from church. Begging and pleading almost never worked, but today a miracle happened. His mother said yes. So he and Travis and Stumpy had worked all morning, sawing and clipping and digging and hacking. Viola had come down there to tell them she had to go over to Macon with her cousin, but they could use Jarvis's hacksaw if they wanted to. Travis had told her they didn't need her, and they definitely didn't need anything that belonged to her loser brother, Jarvis. After a while, they had gotten tired of sawing and clipping and digging and hacking, so they gathered around the Water Wonder 4000 to figure out how they were going to get it down to the pond once they were finished clearing the trees and bushes. Maybe we could take the wheels off a wagon, tie 'em on the sides, and just roll it, Stumpy said. That's dumb, Jarvis said. He slapped the side of the submarine, making a hollow, clanging noise that echoed through the trees. Yeah, Owen said, that is pretty dumb, Stumpy. Stumpy shrugged. Maybe we could pull it behind our bikes, Owen said. Travis rolled his eyes. What if we got some more kids to help us pull it, Travis said. Owen shook his head. Nah, this is our secret, he said. Other kids will just mess things up. Like Viola, Travis said. Owen blushed. He had messed things up by letting Viola get involved, but Travis didn't have to keep reminding him. Stumpy pushed on the submarine with his foot. It's just too heavy, he said. We'll never do it. Yes, we will, Owen said. And then we're just going to drive it all around the pond, like you know all about driving a submarine, right, Owen? Travis asked as he hurled a stick over the top of the Water Wonder 4000. Look, Owen snapped, if y'all don't want to help me anymore, then go on home. I'm the one that found the submarine, and I'm going to get it in the pond, and I'm going to take it for a ride, with or without y'all. He stomped through the weeds and scrambled up on the slope towards the train tracks. Wait, Travis called after him. Owen stopped. Okay, Travis said, we'll help, but we've got to figure out how to do it. We will, Owen said, stamping his foot. Travis and Stumpy joined Owen up by the tracks. They stood in silence, looking down at the submarine, so red and shiny and fantastic. The silver dolphins sparkled in the sun that filtered through the trees. Let's go up to the hayloft and think of some more ideas, Owen said. So they headed to the barn and climbed up the ladder to the hayloft. They took out the list of ideas they had made earlier and sat on the dusty wooden floor and studied them. They talked about them and added to them and argued about them until they were all just plain sick of it. I'm sick of this, Travis said. Me too, Stumpy said. Owen had to admit he was sick of it too. He didn't want to keep talking about getting the submarine into the pond. He wanted to get the submarine into the pond. Let's go check on Tully, he said. So the boys climbed down out of the hayloft, tucked the wrinkled notebook paper with their list of ideas under the tarp with the tools, and headed to the pond. Owen lifted Tully out of the cage and set him on his lap. The bullfrog settled down in the folds of Owen's shorts and closed his eyes. Do you think he's sick? Owen said. Nah, Travis nudged Tully gently with his finger. He's just tired. Let's make the cage bigger, Stumpy said. Yeah, Travis said. We could make it go all the way around the dock. But Owen kept quiet. He knew that Tully didn't need a bigger cage. He knew that Tully needed to be free. He needed to swim around Graham Pond with the other frogs. He needed to climb on the logs and float on the leaves and nestle in the mud and eat bugs, but not in a cage. We could catch more frogs and have a whole frog town, Stumpy said. Yeah, Travis tossed a rock into the middle of the pond. Ploink. Tully opened one eye and then closed it. Travis and Stumpy went on and on about the frog town they could make and how it could have little froggy apartments made out of logs and froggy restaurants where the bugs would be, and there would even be a froggy mayor. Tully, Stumpy said. Tully could be the mayor. But Owen kept quiet. He knew that Tully didn't want to be the mayor of Frogtown. Tully wanted to be free. Chapter 20. Eat your squash, Erlene snapped. Owen looked down at the blob of yellow mush on the plate in front of him. Erlene rattled pans and clanged spoons and mumbled to herself while she huffed around the kitchen. She was annoyed that Owen had managed to beg and plead his way out of church that morning. She was annoyed that he had stayed gone all day without telling anybody where he was, and she was annoyed that he didn't want to eat that blob of nasty squash. "We're leaving for church in 5 minutes," Owen's mother called from upstairs. The Jesters always went to church twice on Sundays, once in the morning and once in the evening. Owen was still amazed that his begging and pleading had worked that morning, but he knew there was no way he was going to get out of going to church that evening. "Eat your squash," Erlene snapped again. Owen dipped the tip of his fork into the yellow mush and then dabbed it onto his tongue. That seemed to annoy Erlene even more. She yanked the plate off the table, muttered about starving children somewhere in the world, and dumped the squash into the dog bowl. "Go get ready for church," she said. While Mrs. Suttles put a smiley face sticker on his Bible passage worksheet, Owen stared out the window and thought about Tully. He had been thinking and thinking and thinking, and somewhere between listening to Travis and Stumpy talk about Frogtown and swirling his fork around in Erlene's mushy yellow squash, he had made a decision. As soon as he got home from church, he was going to go down to the pond and let Tully go. So now he was sitting on a metal chair in the basement of Fork Creek Baptist Church, wishing Mrs. Suttles would hurry up with those smiley face stickers and hoping that his parents didn't want to stay for Bible bingo. Sometimes they did. If they stayed for Bible bingo, it would be dark when they got home and he wouldn't be allowed to go down to the pond. Owen stood in a circle with the other kids as they said some prayers and sang some songs, and then they were finally done. He raced upstairs to find his parents, hoping they were not sitting at the Bible bingo table, and they weren't. Owen said a silent "Yahoo!" in his head and raced out to the car. As the sun sank lower in the sky, the pond seemed to be settling in for the night. The moss-covered logs along the edges were empty, no turtles basking in the summer sun. The water was still and smooth as glass, no water bugs leaving ripples across the surface, not a single pair of yellow bullfrog eyes peering out from the floating leaves that gathered in the clumps in the shadows. The low hum of crickets was starting, interrupted from time to time by the buzz of a mosquito. Owen lifted the lid of the perfect cage. He reached in and scooped Tully up. Then he sat on the end of the dock and had a little chat with the big green bullfrog. He told him about how much fun it had been to come down to the pond every day and look for him. He praised him for his ability to avoid being captured for so long. The way he had darted out of the net quick as lightning, the way he had shot out from under the colander. And then he apologized for a few things. "I'm sorry I made you stay in that cage so long," Owen said to Tully. "Viola said you never wanted to be Tully Graham and that you just wanted to be a frog." Owen said, "So, well, if that's true, and I guess maybe it is, 'cause Viola's almost always right, even though she's so dumb. Well, anyway, I'm sorry about that." The frog moved a little in Owen's lap, and, Owen stroked Tully's back. "I'm sorry if I made you sad." Owen leaned over the edge of the dock and lowered Tully into the water. "Goodbye, Tully," he said. Then he let go of the most beautiful bullfrog in Carter, Georgia, and watched as it pushed its long, froggy legs and disappeared into the pond without so much as a splash. Chapter 21. Owen knew Travis and Stumpy would be mad as hornets that he had let Tully go. But he didn't care. Tully was his frog, not theirs. Travis stomped around the dock, muttering, "Dang it!" and "No fair!" and Stumpy glared and repeated everything Travis said. "And then we spent half the darn summer building that cage," Travis hollered. "Yeah," Stumpy hollered. Owen looked at the perfect cage attached to the edge of the dock, the empty, perfect cage. Then he gazed out across the pond, wishing he could see into the murky water and catch a glimpse of Tully swimming happily with the other frogs, resting peacefully among the rotting leaves on the muddy bottom, maybe enjoying a snack chomping on a juicy cricket. You think your stupid girlfriend Viola is right about everything, Travis snapped. She's not my girlfriend, Owen said. She is too, Stumpy said. She is not. Back and forth and on they went, arguing and hollering and snapping and accusing until they all just ran out of steam and fell silent. A dragonfly hovered in the air in front of them, then flitted off to the other side of the pond. So, are y'all still going to help me with the submarine? Owen said. Get your girlfriend to help you, Travis said. Then he stormed past Owen and headed up the path into the woods. Stumpy stood there for a minute, looking down his feet, and then said, see ya, before heading off up the path after Travis. Owen looked for the biggest rock he could find, hurled it with all his might into the pond. It hit with a loud ploink, sending a spray of water into the air. Now what was he going to do? How was he ever going to get that submarine into the pond? Owen sawed and clipped and dug and hacked all by himself. He hummed as he worked, and with each branch he sawed and each thorny bush he dug up, he began to feel better, until Viola stepped out of the woods and said, I'm here. Owen groaned. Y'all got a lot done yesterday, Viola said, glancing around. Owen tossed a tangle of branches onto a pile of brush at the end of the clearing. Look, Viola, he said, if you want to help, then help, but don't talk. Why are you so mean? Viola said, putting on her dirty work gloves. Owen didn't answer. In fact, Owen didn't answer any of the gazillion questions Viola asked. He didn't answer when she asked where Travis and Stumpy were. He didn't answer when she asked if he had called the railroad company yet. And he didn't answer when she asked if he was going to the pond to visit that sad old frog of his later that day. Owen wasn't going to say one word to Viola, but then she went and said something that made him change his plans. I know how to get the submarine down to the pond. Owen stopped his sawing. He studied Viola, her big fly eyes peering at him through her thick glasses, her freckly white legs, her know-it-all face. How, he said. Chapter 22. Owen sat on a patch of moss beside the Water Wonder 4000 and listened to Viola going on and on in her school teacher voice about the ancient Egyptians, about pyramids, about simple machines, blah, blah, blah. Are you even listening to me, Owen? She said, jabbing him with a finger. Her eyes were red and watery. Every few minutes she wiped at her nose with a balled-up tissue. Look, Viola, he said, I don't even know what the heck you're talking about. What do Egyptians have to do with anything? So Viola explained it again. Some people think that the Egyptians moved those big stones for their pyramids by rolling them on logs. She went to the front of the submarine and squatted down. See, we get some logs and we put them under the front. She patted the ground. Then we pull the submarine over the logs, which will be easy because the logs will roll. She stood up and brushed the dirt off her knees. Then, as it rolls along, we take logs from behind it and move them back to the front again until we get to the pond. A light bulb went on. Owen got it. He snapped his fingers. Roll it to the pond. Yeah! He jumped up and ran over to the submarine. And the pond is downhill from here, so that'll make it even easier. Owen couldn't control himself. He beamed at Viola, and Viola beamed back. Owen sure was glad Travis and Stumpy weren't here to see all this beaming. Now we just have to get some logs, Viola said, rubbing her watery eyes and scratching at the pink rash that was appearing on her neck. Owen's beam disappeared in a snap. How are we supposed to do that? He said. Well, Viola looked up into the trees. We could, let's see. Owen never would have believed this day would come, the day Viola didn't know everything. It figured. All those times she had irritated the heck out of him by knowing everything, now here was the one time he needed her to know everything, and she didn't. And then a light bulb went on again. Pipes, he said. Viola stared at him through her thick glasses. Pipes? Yeah, pipes, like water pipes. Owen jerked his head in the direction of the new subdivision out by the main highway. They're putting in a water line over on Sycamore Road. There's tons of PVC pipes just laying there in the ditch. That's perfect, Viola said. They beamed at each other. There's only one problem, Viola said. Owen rolled his eyes. Here was Miss Know-It-all again. We can't do it by ourselves, she said. Why not? Look, Owen, she said, even if we could get enough pipes down here, we'd need help pulling that thing. She flung her arms in the direction of the submarine. We'll need 2 people pulling and 2 people moving the pipes from the back to the front. Dang it. Viola was right again. We need Travis and Stumpy, she said. No way, Owen said. They're quitters. Then we'll have to find somebody else. Viola squeezed her lips together, came close to making that smug face that Owen hated. He shook his head. If we tell anybody else, some grown-up is going to find out for sure, and then everything will be messed up. Then we need Travis and Stumpy, Viola said. Owen sighed. Then, as if Viola hadn't irritated him enough, she said, You are going to make sure the submarine works before you try to move it, right? Well, yeah, I'm sure, he said. Viola lifted her eyebrows and looked at Owen with her fly eyes. Then do it now, she said. Go on in there and start that thing up. Owen looked over at the Water Wonder 4000. He had crawled up inside it lots of times now. He had studied the switches, examined the gauges, fiddled with the joystick. But could he actually start that submarine? Could he really make it run? Maybe he was just going to have to float around inside the submarine in the pond and not actually drive it. I will, Owen said, as soon as we get Travis and Stumpy back down here. Owen wasn't in the mood for Earlene's grumpiness. When she snapped at him about the dirt he had tracked in the house, he shrugged. When she lectured him about the dangers of the rotting floorboards in the hayloft, he nodded. And when she gave him the evil eye for spilling milk on the kitchen table, he just said, huh. Then he wiped up the milk, swept up the dirt, motioned for Pete and Leroy, and went outside to sit on the back steps and hope that Viola stayed away. But Owen only sat on the back steps for about a minute. His insides were just too wound up to sit still. It had been more than a week since he had first heard the thud, the crack of wood, the tumble, tumble, tumble sound, the sound of the submarine falling off the train. Somebody was going to be looking for that submarine. Owen was sure of it. If he was going to get the Water Wonder 4000 into Graham Pond, he was going to have to do it soon. But there were so many problems. How was he going to convince Travis and Stumpy to help him when they were so mad at him for letting Tully go? And even if they agreed to help, could the 4 of them actually get the submarine in the pond? And if they did get the submarine in the pond, would he really be able to drive it? Problems, problems, problems. But Owen was determined. If he didn't do this now, then when would he ever have another chance to drive a little submarine around in a pond? Never. He would never have a chance to do something like that ever again. Owen strolled around the yard, kicking at dirt and tossing sticks for Pete and Leroy to chase. Then he headed down to the woods and made his way along the path towards the train tracks. Pete and Leroy darted in and out of the woods, eager to chase anything Owen happened to throw, pine cones, sticks, even rocks. Then, just as Owen neared the fork in the path, Leroy came leaping out of the woods with something in his mouth. Not a pine cone, not a stick, not a rock, but something made of paper. What's that? Owen said, clapping his hands for Leroy to come to him. The dog trotted happily over and sat in front of Owen, his tail swishing back and forth in the pine needles on the path. Let me see that, fella, Owen said. Leroy had brought Owen a warped and wrinkled paperback book. Owen brushed dirt off the book and examined it. On the cover was a picture of the Water Wonder 4000. Above the picture were 2 words that made Owen let out a whoop that echoed through the trees. The 2 words were, what do you think? Operator's Manual. He found the directions. Chapter 23. Owen lay on his stomach in the hayloft and read the operator's manual for the submarine, starting with Chapter 1, Getting to Know Your Water Wonder 4000, and ending with Chapter 6, Safety Tips and Troubleshooting. Owen didn't understand some of the stuff. Actually, Owen didn't understand a lot of the stuff. There were sections on ambient pressure and buoyancy and ballast and lots of other things he had never heard of. But there was plenty of stuff that seemed easy enough and made Owen think he really could do this. He could drive the submarine around Graham Pond. He tucked the manual under his shirt, climbed down out of the hayloft, jumped on his bike, and raced over to Tupelo Road. Travis and Stumpy were building a skateboard ramp in the middle of the road while Jolene Burkus hollered at them. "I'm going to call the police," she hollered from her front porch. Stumpy looked a little nervous, but Travis just hammered away without even a glance in her direction. Owen's bike skidded to a stop, sending gravel and dirt flying. Travis stopped hammering. "Hey," Owen said. Travis just lifted his eyebrows. "Guess what?" Owen grinned at them. "What?" Stumpy said. "Leroy found the operator's manual for the submarine." Owen took the wrinkled book out from under his shirt and held it up for them to see. Stumpy tossed his hammer aside. "Cool!" But Travis stayed quiet. So Owen took a deep breath and went to work on Travis. He told him how the submarine only needed 3 feet of water to float, how those air tanks were already filled and ready to go, how there were just 3 switches to flip on the control panel. Owen sort of hurried over some of the stuff, like about flooding the ballast and adjusting the buoyancy control, since he really didn't get that part yet. And then he slowed down so he could be real dramatic when he told the part about using the joystick to go up and down and forward and backward. "It's easy," Owen said. "And," he added, jabbing his thumbs at himself, "I figured out how to get the sub down to the pond." Now that's not true. Viola did that. Travis kept his mouth set tight and his eyes narrowed. Owen waited. Stumpy looked from Travis to Owen and back to Travis. "So," Owen said, "you in or you out?" "I'm in," Stumpy said. Then Owen and Stumpy looked at Travis and waited. Jolene Burkus hollered something from her front porch, but the 3 boys just ignored her. "What about Viola?" Travis said. "Oh, yeah," Stumpy said. "What about Viola?" "Look," Owen said, "we need her to help us. It's going to take 4 people. Besides," Owen looked down at the operator's manual in his hand, "she does know a lot about some of this stuff." Then Owen tossed in a heartfelt, "Come on, Travis," and waited. A dog barked. A fly buzzed. Jolene Burkus slammed her front door, and Travis said, "Okay." That night, the train rumbled along the tracks behind the house while Owen stared up at the ceiling of his bedroom. His grandfather's rhythmic snores drifted through the dimly lit hallway outside the door, and from far away at the pond came the low, steady rum of a bullfrog. Tully. Owen was sure of it. Then he took a flashlight out of the drawer of his bedside table and studied the operator's manual for the Water Wonder 4000 late into the night. Start tonight in chapter 24. Owen and Travis sat down inside the Water Wonder 4000 while Viola and Stumpy stood beside it, peering in the window. Viola read from the operator's manual. "Before launching your Water Wonder 4000, she read, "there are a few simple tests to perform." "Just get to the directions," Owen called through the window. "Turn on the 2 breakers," Viola said. Owen found the switches labeled breaker and pushed them on. Click. "Now flip the switch marked control panel." Owen flipped the switch and the control panel lit up, filling the little compartment inside the submarine with a soft orange glow. Owen and Travis high-fived each other. Stumpy danced around in a circle chanting, "It works, it works, it works." "Now flip on the auto depth control and the electronic buoyancy control switches," Viola said. Owen did each thing that Viola read from the operator's manual. He pushed the joystick forward, making the little propeller on the back of the submarine spin. He pushed the thumb switch on the joystick, making the little propellers on the wings spin. The soft hum of the motor made Owen's stomach flip with excitement. Next, he opened the valves in the air tanks while Viola continued to read. "Now you have to open the ballast, blow the valves," she said. Travis turned the valves and both boys jumped as the blast of air entered the tanks. Turn on the flow meter so air for breathing flows into the cockpit, Viola called through the window. Owen and Travis studied the labels on the switches and valves on the control panel. Here, Travis said, flipping a switch. There was a soft hissing noise. Viola held the wrinkled operator's manual close to her glasses and read, "You are now ready to experience an amazing underwater world, safe inside your Water Wonder 4000. "Okay, on the count of 3, Owen said as he gripped one end of the water pipe. 1, 2, 3. He and Viola lifted the pipe out of the ditch and made their way along the side of the road towards the train tracks. "Hurry up," he snapped at Viola. If anyone saw them taking these pipes, they'd be in big trouble. Travis and Stumpy huffed and puffed as they struggled with the pipe ahead of them. They had all decided that 4 pipes should be enough to roll the submarine down to the pond. When they turned off the main road and entered the woods, Viola whined, "Stop, Owen, I've got to rest." Viola was so aggravating. But Owen was trying to be patient. Because no matter how many times he read the operator's manual, Owen was never going to understand half the stuff that Viola knew about submarines. He had let her read the manual, and she had tried and tried to explain things to him and Travis and Stumpy, but they had stared at her with open-mouthed confusion until she just flapped her hands at them and said, "Oh, never mind." By the time they finally got the last water pipe down to the submarine, Travis and Stumpy were checking the knots in the ropes they had tied to the stubby wings on both sides of the Water Wonder 4000. They had played rock, paper, scissors to see who would pull the ropes and who would move the pipes. Owen and Stumpy would pull the ropes. Travis and Viola would move the pipes. "There," Owen said, dropping his end of the pipe and lining it up with the others. He wiped his hands on his shorts. "Now, how do we get the pipes under the sub?" "Easy," Viola said. Y'all push down on the back end and make the front one come up. Then I'll roll the pipes up under it." So that's what they did. On the count of 3, the boys pushed on the back end of the submarine. The front end lifted slightly off the ground. Viola grunted as she scrambled to roll one of the water pipes up under the submarine. It took a few tries. Counting, pushing, rolling. First 1 pipe, then 2. Then they all had to pull on the ropes to move the submarine forward a bit. Then more counting and pushing and rolling. Finally, the little red submarine was perched on top of the water pipes. Owen's head was spinning with excitement. "Okay, let's do it," he hollered, racing to the front of the submarine and grabbing one of the ropes. And so it began. Owen and Travis and Stumpy and Viola maneuvering the submarine down to the pond. Owen and Stumpy pulled on the ropes while Travis yelled, "Slow down! Not so fast!" Travis and Viola scrambled to the rear of the submarine to pull out a pipe, carry it back around to the front. Every now and then they had to stop and saw a tree stump that was too high or clip a branch that was in the way, but inch by inch, foot by foot, yard by yard, they rolled the Water Wonder 4000 closer and closer to Graham Pond.